to this edition of Arbors Lit Club. And today our guest is a published author, Kalpana Mohan. And Rohini was instrumental in bringing her tonight to talk to us. So I will give the floor over to Rohini so she can introduce her friend to us. Ro?
Okay.
There's just a warning to all the husbands. Keep your checkbook away and don't fall for anything your wife say after Kalpana speaks today. Okay?
She's not talking about a book on saris. Okay. I met Kalpana for the first time at Jyoti's daughter Shadi in Palakkad, Thrissur. And there she was dressed in a gorgeous sari and busy photographing people in their saris. And we got to talk the first time that I met her. And after that, we've been friends on Facebook, on and off. And the second time I met her was at Ravi's cousin's sister's son's shadi in Chicago. Yes, that's all I have. But I have read everything that she writes on Facebook. She's a prolific writer, has a lovely style of writing. It's very breezy and it's very entertaining. And then, therefore, I thought I would reach out to her and ask her to share her journey and share some of her writings with us. Over to you, Kalpana.
Thank you, Rohini. I really appreciate
Kalpana, just before you start,
yes.
We were at the wedding too. My cousin and Rani's cousin is Sangeeta Seshadri. And I too have read a lot of your writing.
Thank you. Lovely to meet you.
Hi.
And thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys. Which writer doesn't want to speak to potential readers, So I'm just going to share my screen, a quick little, let's see, I've been having some issues today. Okay, there we go. Can you all see it?
Yeah.
Okay, fantastic.
Yes, we can.
So there is, meanwhile, this thing is going on. Okay, so I named it, crafting a life in writing, because I just felt like I should just take you through my journey very quickly. I won't bore you, I promise. So I began with an interest in words. My father had a collection of encyclopedia. First of all, I was born in 1961, and in the 60s, my love of words began in the pages of the encyclopedia. I just loved the rhyme, the fall of the words, and the poetry and the history and geography and all of that. There were also these lending libraries in the 60s and 70s, and even now in India. And so even before the British Council, going to the British Council library was a regular thing, there were those books at the lending library. And I think I honed some of my humor and everything in the pages of those rich comic books, I tell you. So my father also had a very quirky mind. So he, I think, informed some of the way I think. Let's see, sorry. So there was, sorry guys, I'm just going all over the place right now. I also, I went to Tanzania, Dar es Salaam, Tanzania in 1972 as an 11-year-old. So mostly I grew up in Chennai, but around 11 years, from the age of 11 to 18, I was in Tanzania because my dad went to the government of Tanzania as an accountant. And in those days, in the 60s and 70s, a lot of people went to Africa. And so my mind was shaped also by the places that I went to. And in Dar es Salaam, I was looking at a life in India. And when I came back to India on leave for about 2 months, I would look at my life in Africa. In 1978, Dad's term was done. And we came back and I joined the University of Madras. Meenakshi College had just begun. In fact, I was the very first graduating batch of English literature students at Meenakshi. the thing that happened in 1978 was my father, like all parents in India in those years, wanted me to be a STEM major. I think there are a lot of doctors and engineers in this group, so you probably will certainly vouch for that as well. So there was this push for being a STEM major. But I knew in the heart of hearts that I was really into literature was what got me. And so I went behind his back and switched it to English literature. So in 1978, that's what I started out as. I did get a diploma in journalism. And in 1984, I got married and left for the US a year later in 1985. But strangely enough, I found myself pursuing a degree in computer science. There are a lot of reasons why that happened, but in any case, I did get a degree in computer science, and I actually loved programming. I think it taught me efficiency and economy. I, in fact, really enjoyed mathematics. For the longest time, I thought I didn't get it, but I really loved calculus, I remember. And in 1998, something happened in our lives. It was sort of a milestone year for me because I started working at IBM in 1989. So for 10 years, I worked there, and my husband got an opportunity to go to Paris. And so off we went with two children. They were 4 and 8. And it was an inflection point in my life because I could not work. I didn't have a work visa. He was on a sabbatical. And so I found myself writing a lot that year. And by the time I got back in the summer of 1999, I knew that I did not want to be a programmer anymore. So I told my husband that I was taking a voluntary retirement package and I was going to reskill myself. Now, I had no idea about what freelancing would entail. I had absolutely no friends in the writing business. So I literally was starting from scratch. But one of the things that I was always very clear about when the kids were young, especially because my husband was constantly gone, pretty much 2 to 3 weeks in a year, he was gone. He's a computer scientist with IBM. He just retired last June, actually. So yeah, so he was gone all the time. That meant that I was both a father and mother to the kids. So parenting essentially dictated my career at that time, the writing career at that time. So I started writing for consumer magazines, both local, regional, and national magazines. At the same time, I was also writing for an Indian American magazine circulated in the western region of the United States. I think I haven't said that I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so in Silicon Valley. So I started writing for this magazine, and that is where it is in the pages of India Currents magazine that I honed my voice, that I sort of built my immigrant's point of view. And I understood what it is to have an audience that was reading me. Now, at about the same time, I don't know if you guys remember, the internet went bust. Even as I started writing for print magazines, I started writing for Business Week Online. And even before I got my third article out, they had already gone bust. Rather, the freelance budget was suffering. So this happened in many newspapers at the time. Journalism itself was undergoing a change. Digital was becoming bigger. But folks like me suffered for that. But sooner or later, there was also Facebook happening in the mid-2000s. And so I started writing on Facebook. I realized that that was a great place for me to get feedback from people. And stories were everywhere. I started writing about my my daily life, started writing about my husband, my children. Parenting always offers a rich trove of stories. So I also noticed that there were so many things I could take, local stories that of universal import. So even as I was doing that, in 2011, my sister, I have only one sibling, she lives in Singapore. She's 11 years older than I. She called me from Singapore and said that she felt that our dad was not doing well. So I want to back up a little bit. In 2005, we lost our mother. She passed away after 3 years of suffering from cancer. And from about 2005 all the way to 2011, my father had been living alone. He was working full-time for my brother-in-law's securities company in Chennai. We also had someone called Vinayakan who came into our lives. He came into our lives as a driver in 1996. So while Vinayakan was very much around in our house, Dad wasn't entirely alone. Vinayakan got married in January of 2012. And suddenly my father's feeling was that he was not, I think something changed in him, meaning that he felt he was not needed anymore. Even though he had this full-time job that he was going to from about 10 to 5. And by then, mind you, he was already 82 or so. What am I saying? Sorry, he was close to 86 at that point. Yeah, so my sister called me and she said that she felt he was succumbing to some kind of depression. And at that point, I wondered what I should do. And she said, just call him every day. I would not call him every day. My sister is the very, very loyal, good kid. And I told her I would. And at that point, I also decided to go one step further. I decided to give my father something to do. And I started interviewing him. So from about February through March, every day I would talk to my father and give him a little to do. And I wanted to say that a lot of times we think we know so much about our parent, but when we are growing up, we learn about our parents through osmosis. We don't really know enough about them, but it was while interviewing him, I discovered a lot of things that I had no clue about. For instance, one of the things that I didn't know, there is this notion of Gundam in Tamil. There were 4 or 5 times when my father was near death. I had no idea about this. So writing on Facebook was one of the things I pursued when I went to India, even when I went to India to take care of my father. So while I was interviewing him from February to March, I had absolutely no idea that he was going to be physically unwell by about summer. So in summer, our family visited India. My dad did complain of some kind of discomfort. I had to come back. I had to go back to the Bay Area because our son was entering college at the time in the fall of 2012. Now, by about October, I had to fly back to India because Dad was in the hospital. And at that point, I realized that Dad was not going to do well. He had a terminal illness. He did not want to go under the knife. So at that point, I essentially stayed in India. My sister and I took turns to take care of our dad. And during the whole time, I was writing on Facebook from India about my dad, as well as Vinayakam, and all of the things that were happening that were skewing my life while I was trying to be a foreigner really, but living as a local in India for literally after about some 30 years. So all of those posts were getting read not only by people in California, but also by people in India. And I had no idea then that those posts would actually were the beginnings of my first book, Daddykins. People who read them said, you know, there is a book here. And ultimately, when I went to Jaipur Literature Festival, I ended up meeting an agent, and that is the genesis of the book about my father. So I thought I would read just a little bit out of the book, and I'm going to stop sharing so you can see me up close. Okay, there we go. Okay, I hope you can see me now, right? So I'm going to read a very short passage about how my father seemed lost in his own, this is my book, by the way, Daddykins, how he seemed lost in his own home. One evening, I found my father in that state, in front of his open almirah in his bedroom. He couldn't find the salary envelope for Vinayaka. He hobbled over to the bed and sank into it. "Please pardon me," he said, looking helpless. I sat down next to him and stroked his head, feeling a few errant white hairs beneath my fingers. I hugged him. In my arms, he felt like a seashell on Marina Beach. I heard his heartbeat in the hollow of his chest. The night before, Daddykins had counted Vinayakam's salary several times. He had given me the recycled window envelope with the money. I had verified the amount, marked it Vinayakam, showed him the envelope, and then put it away in Daddykins' presence in the left side of his drawer. I got up and walked over to his almirah and pulled out the envelope. His face flushed with relief. "You know, sometimes I do want to die," he said, taking the envelope, frustrated about his increasing dimness. He looked up at me, but then I realized I cannot leave this world. "What's holding you back?" I asked. "I have 2 girls. They are still young," he said. "They need me. I cannot die." In most countries, my sister and I would now qualify for retirement. On application forms, Urmila, who had 3 grandchildren with a 4th on the way, had almost reached the ceiling on age checkboxes. I was fighting to stay at the checkbox marked age 55 and below. But Daddykins believed we could not take care of ourselves. I kissed him on the forehead. I wondered why humans couldn't be like the African wildebeest that moved on, sometimes leaving its injured child to be eaten by the lion. The faces of my 2 children swam up towards me for a second. Articulate, stubborn, mature enough to trounce my opinions, old enough to live on their own, possibly bold enough to buy condoms and get drunk. But my daughter and my son would be my babies until the day I died. That night, I understood what my father meant. So there is one more little bit I'd like to read to you, and this is from the last chapter of the book. And this was, I've taken a different tack in the last chapter because all of the things that happen around death, especially all of the 13 days of the rites and so on, can be really rattling to us. And I decided to write it as short little bits. So this particular one is about a call that I received the day somebody read my father's obituary in the Hindu. "Madam, you don't know me. I just saw the obituary in the Hindu this morning. Your father was my boss from 1956 to 1959. I'll never forget his encouragement and his kindness. One tiny remark from him set the tone for my career and the rest of my life. You know, I was typing up a report that morning. He passed me by. He said, Srinivasan, you know typing too? How can I ever forget that word too? I suppose it was a small observation on his part, but in the way he said, LV sir, we all called him LV sir, you know. In the way he said it, he did not ever behave as if typing were an ordinary thing. He looked upon it as a valuable skill, and he appreciated me for the talent that I possessed. I was just a superintendent then, but 60 years later, I still remember how special he made me feel that day. He is the sole reason I set high goals for myself and excelled even after I left the AG's office. I'm so sad today. Please accept my heartfelt condolences. He was a great man. Once again, I'm going to. So I'll just take you through some photographs. My parents were married in 1944. In 1956, my father got an opportunity with the High Commission of India in Lahore. And so they just, much as it was very, very upsetting to my mother to leave Kerala, my mother had not gone to school beyond 4th grade. And for her, many of these experiences, even Tanzania, was very hard on her. She could not speak English. And she was always afraid of leaving her comfort zone. But my father had always wanted new opportunities. So this is my father and I at Parthasarathipuram in Chennai. My father's first scooter was a Lambretta, and this is right outside our bungalow in 1962, I believe. My father was the senior most guy at Jiva Park. So my book, in my book, Chennai is a very important character. And I refer again and again to Jiva Park, which is where my father exercised even several months before his death. So he passed away in 2014 he was very close to 90. Before he passed away, he had worked at my brother-in-law's company to literally 3 months prior to his death. So even though he had retired from the AG's office in 1981 and hadn't worked for about 10 years or so, he just loved being, he would always tell me he loved feeling needed. This is my sister, my father and I on Kartigay. This would be the last Kartigay with our father in December 2012. I had no idea at that time, but when you look back, all of these are such special moments. This is Vinayakam with my father just a few minutes before my father left for work one morning. By this time, my father had become very emaciated. He had, aside from the tumor in the head of the pancreas, my father also had esophageal stricture. So his eating was he was literally on a liquid diet for months upon months. So Vinayakam was the guy who essentially saw him through until the end. He learned a lot from my father, and he helped my father a lot in the end. So Vinayakam, even now, Vinayakam is very much attached to our house. He came into our home as a driver, as an 18-year-old driver in utter penury. And in the end, my father groomed him in many different ways. So this is my dad at work. This was literally about 2 months after he had a stroke in November. I thought it was sometime in October, I could be wrong. In October 2013, when he had a stroke. So my father walked again. a lot of neurologists who saw him said that an 89-year-old man doing this was literally unheard of. But Dad basically walked again. He had lost the use of the left arm completely, but he managed to descend down one level of staircase and came back up one day. And the photograph was taken with his physiotherapist that morning. This is 3 days before my father passed away on Father's Day in 2014. My sister was leaving for Singapore to see her newborn grandson, and Dad and she took leave of each other. Now I want to talk about one little quote that I always look upon very fondly, that, you know, when people talk about someone being lucky, it's always about preparation, meeting, opportunity. I was writing my father's book when I got an email from an editor at Aleph Book Company. She had seen some of my columns in India Currents, and so she wrote to me asking if I could write a book on English. She thought I was the right person to write it. And so that is how I got a book deal with Aleph Book Company. And it was published a year after Daddykins was published. And what the editor wanted was really a book on the eccentricities of the English language. But, you know, when I went around India, I traveled quite a lot as part of research for this book. And as I talked to a lot of people, I felt like writing a casual book about the oddities of the English language would be probably interesting and saleable, would be a commercial success, but would really not mean much beyond that. I wanted to write a deeper book. And that is how I ended up writing this one. So for this book, I decided to talk about the evolution of the English language in India. And I would talk about the most important places in India, all of the places that had some import on the language. And I also felt I should tell the story of each aspect of the English language using somebody. So for instance, in Delhi, I sought an interview with Sir Mark Tully. I had no idea whether it would work out or not, but it did. I had read all of his books and I did get an interview, even though it was a very short one. The Delhi chapter had so much more weight after I had got the opportunity to meet him, as well as a gentleman called Pavan Verma. So, you know, around India, I looked for people. Sometimes it didn't work out. An interview would simply not happen. But almost always, I found the person that I thought would be the right person for me. And sometimes it was just serendipity. So one of the things that I want to share with you is I was in Bombay hoping, this was at Prithvi Theatre, and I had just seen a wonderful English play in which the whole family of Nasiruddin Shah acted. So I just barged into his green room. And I just thought that perhaps an interview with him might work out. He did give me his email, but I never ever got an opportunity to talk to him. But standing in line at Prithvi Theatre, I came in touch with somebody else who was known to an illustrious gentleman from the Pune Film Institute. And that gentleman, Kranti Kanade, an award-winning filmmaker from the Institute, would be a central character for the Maharashtra chapter. His mother, it turns out, is a very important theatre personality, Shakuntala Kanade, in Maharashtra. So, you know, so with this book, I also realized that education would be one of the very, very important chapters. So I went all the way to Dalhousie to shadow a principal of a school called the Dalhousie Hilltop School. And there I was privy to how the farmers in and around that area want their children to learn English. So here was a public school where all of the children were first-time English learners. So that turns out is the opening chapter of my book. This is at Lawrence Lovedale. I spoke to a lot of English teachers. I walked through the Calcutta South Park Cemetery. This is the Princess Parvati Bai of Travancore. So for one of my chapters, I decided that if I could get an interview with her, she would be my entry into how the princely states were, rather people from the royal families were often the first people to learn the English language. So I was born in 1961, and even by about 10 or 11, even though I was writing in English, I was not very comfortable speaking English. Whereas someone like Princess Parvati Bai had English all around her. Her parents and grandparents spoke it effortlessly. And even before she could write the English language, she was already speaking it. Now here is, to the right is Mithilesh Singh, one of the most important people, a book buyer rather, for Bari Sons booksellers in New Delhi. That bookstore apparently will not run, and everybody who buys books at Bari Sons veers towards Mithilesh Singh, who did not know English for the longest time. He came into Bari Sons as a 22-year-old man from Bihar, and he learned on the job. So I featured, in the Delhi chapter, I featured Mark Tully as one of the persons that I was interviewing, and in contrast to him was Mithilesh Singh. This is Danish Seth. Bangaloreans must know him. I had seen his work and I just loved it. I watched literally every video, and he informed the Bangalore chapter. This is an illiterate woman. She's a maid, and she uses such a fund of English words, I can't tell you. And she is one of the most empowered women I know. And I just wanted to tell you, beware. Alteration of ladies to gents. That is English in India. 90% of all people are caused by accidents. There's a lot of truth to that. And I will read a small section out of An English Maid in India. Are we good on time?
Yeah.
Okay. So I just wanted to set the stage a little bit here. My last chapter is called What About the Mother Tongue? So this is set in Calcutta. And for the longest time, I had wanted to meet Nobonita Devsen, a prolific poet and writer in Bengali, although she is extremely gifted even in English. She only wrote in Bengali. For those of you who do not know, she's the ex-wife, now she's passed away now, but the ex-wife of Amartya Sen. At a lecture on the topic of translation and multilingualism in Hyderabad a few years ago, Nobonita had paused before saying, "You cannot be global without being rooted in your culture." I felt my breath catch in my chest. It was a grain of wisdom cradling the world within it. If I was secure in myself, I would be generous and tolerant towards the world. I thought then of Nobonita's sprawling canopy of work and of her ability to connect several worlds with her knowledge of Hindi, Odia, Assamese, French, German, Sanskrit, and Hebrew, in addition to Bengali and English. Nobonita was driving towards the oneness we all could achieve as Indians, as human beings, really, if only we would harness our ability to feel, to imagine, to recognize, and to know that through that mirror of translation, as Nobonita so lyrically said to a room full of students and professors at the university, one could see one's head on another's shoulder. So I will share the screen once again to the last bit, and just wanted to thank you all for your time. I just wanted to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Kalpana. It's beautiful, very nice.
Very engaging.
Thank you. Any-
You know, I read a lot of your chapters from Daddykins, but the second book, I have to go and get it now.
Thank you. Yes, would be lovely. Lovely.
Yes.
There have been some good reviews. There have been some critical reviews, but that's part of the game.
That is.
So yeah, but it was exciting, meeting all of those people. And I genuinely felt with that book that English is a living language. It has to be experienced in India. And I had read enough books on the English language in India, and either they were very academic or they were somewhat condescending. And I wanted to really get deeper into it. And some of the conversations I had with people like Mark Cully and Jerry Pinto and Sandeep Roy Chowdhury, many people across India were just such memorable experiences. And all of them are in the book. In some form or other, I bring them in.
Prasad?
Yeah, Kalpana, before you wrote English Made in India, if you look back at your own writings, did you find a distinct change after you wrote that book in terms of the language that you were using? Meaning, having researched English Made in India, did you find that the English that you were using was seeming to be a little different?
I don't believe so.
He's asking if you corrupted your own English.
The one thing that did happen is, even as I was working on English Made in India, I began to realize how I needed to read translations of regional literature. And so I went to every possible bookstore, on College Road in Calcutta. Mm-hmm. So I wasn't College Road or is it Oxford Road? College Road. Yeah. So I got every possible book by all sorts of Bengali authors, because if you go to Oxford bookstore, if you go to any bookstore in India, I am so appalled that regional language books are simply, translations of regional language books are not available. You go to Higginbotham's in Chennai, and the guy says, Amma, not fast moving, madam. So,
I think times are changing now with that, though. Now there are a lot of translations.
I hope so.
Yeah, there are.
For a long time, I hunted down the English rendering translation of Chemin by Takadi Shivashankara Pillai. And it took me months before I could get hold of an English version.
I see.
So you're right, but it's very encouraging that every year now we see 2-3 Indian English words being added officially to the dictionary.
I know, it is exciting, and I think Perumal Murugan's books, Perumal Murugan's acceptance, and his being the fact that they featured him at Jaipur did make a difference, I think. So you are even Gachar Gochar by Vivek Shanbag also got press in the New York Times. So you're seeing a lot of interest outside, which is exciting, actually. So so in some ways, writing this book made me very conscious about the fact that I needed to do due diligence, and read more. So,
Great.
Wonderful.
The thing about translation is you have to have such a good command over vernacular and
Mhm.
English.
Mhm.
And the good thing is that now, lately, more and more really good translations are coming up. And then you also have gems like Sachidanandan, and so they are English masters themselves. So they are translating their own works.
Their own work.
And there is a very good author, Geeta Krishnamurti translates from Malayalam to English. She has translated some of MT's works. O.V. Vijayan writes in English and Malayalam. So I've been following mostly the Malayalam translation because there's so much wealth of literature in Malayalam, and I'm very shaky in my own mother tongue, very sadly. So I see that
That's
there is one called Hangwoman, which is a translation of Arachar K.R. Meera. Again, a Malayalam book, fantastic book.
hang woman.
Yeah, the original is Arachar K.R. Meera, and it was translated by a girl called Devaki, J. Devaki, into the title I'm not very happy with. It's a literal translation, Hangwoman. Hangman is the Arachar, but in this, the character is a woman, so she named it Hangwoman.
Nice.
Then there is Harish's Mustache, which has come out recently. It won the J. What is that?
JC Prize or?
JCB Literature Prize in India.
Oh.
Original is Misha in Malayalam, and now the translation has come out. So Malayalam at least is winning as far as translation goes. And Gachar Guchar is fantastic. Short and sweet book. Having lived in Bangalore, because the original is Kannada, I could really relate with it. So there is good news for translations on the horizon.
Absolutely. Very exciting, actually. Yeah.
Anybody else? I had seen that Shibu had popped up briefly.
Yeah,
but it
he
seems to me
has.
has disappeared again, off to party.
Oh, he's
Here
here.
you are.
Hi, Kalpana.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I managed to squeak in.
Oh,
But-
all right. Thank you. Thank you so
Very
much.
nice talk. So tell me, now that you have written about Indian English, so to speak, do you think English as spoken in different parts of the world should, like American English, become a unique kind of thing? So should we have one Indian English and one English English,
Queen's English.
and then or should we all try to become pure Queen's English as our teachers in school try to drill into us?
No, I think we should keep our uniqueness, that is our brand.
And
And
continue
actually,
to.
this linguist called David Crystal says in several talks, actually, he says, ultimately the language that wins, right, is the language of commercial import, right? So let's say the next Google or something comes from India. Well, it's looking more and more like China, but whatever happens next will determine what we will speak or what will have the most value, So who knows? It could be Indian English for that reason.
No,
But I really believe that.
It's
I like the fact that we've all. That is one of the things that I noticed when I worked on this book. I talked to a lot of young people, and years ago when I was growing up, we all worried about how we sounded, because we can all see how we can easily spot someone. We know that somebody is from Kerala by the way they speak English. And we all worried about diction so much. Today's young people in India don't worry about it at all. And it is so exciting to see, actually.
In fact, in Chennai, I noticed just trying to speak English regularly from a very vernacular group, constantly making, and I never correct them for this mistake because they communicate that. They constantly say, I could not be able to do that, sir. They always say, I could not be able to do that. And I know what they're trying to say. And it's not one person. I've heard it from so many. And I know they belong to a group which fluently speaks Tamil.
My son keeps talking in a Kannada English. He is majorly into dramatics, my 9th grader. So he keeps slipping in. I mean, his diction is perfect, but he likes to do the Kannada accent, which I think he learned from Danish Seth. Danish Seth is the most corrupt language corrupter in the country. He's just
But
brilliant.
have you seen how creative that man is?
Have you seen that movie?
Oh, Nagraj?
The latest one. The latest movie is
I'm not-
coming.
No,
I'm not-
Nagraj. Nograj, by the way. Nograj.
Nagraj, yeah.
Nograj.
I got hooked in with all the telephone prank call series that he started, you know.
Oh
Those
my
were,
God.
you could just roll over.
You know, I saw him at work one day in Bangalore, and I saw there was an American, there was an Israeli, there were two other people, but of all of them, Danish was the one who stood out because of his ability to go across languages in English.
Yes,
With English.
absolutely.
It totally blew me away. So.
I think Danish State single-handedly make lockdown so much easier.
Tell me about it. His Instagram, I just love his Instagram.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
Lot.
Rekha, you got anything to say? Rekha is hiding with the
Hi,
video on
sorry.
because
I will
apparently
come
she's
up
just woken up and she looks like a zombie. Yeah, you
I've
do look
been-
like a zombie, but you can say something.
Yes, I'd love to actually. I'm glad you pulled me out. I think it was a real pleasure listening to this and really love the whole chat and getting to hear about the books and the whole journey. Very inspiring, actually. A lot
Rekha
of
is a
time.
head shrinker. She's a psychiatrist.
Ah.
So and if
Oh
you
my
need her,
God.
I can give you her number on a separate chat box.
Yeah, I'm very, a very august audience here. I know that.
It's interesting how you talked about stories, and I've always wanted to write, but not in terms of wanting to write a book. Or I just love writing,
Mhm.
and for the
Which she
longest
does
time,
well.
So I think you should write. I mean, you probably have a fund of stories, and
Yes,
very
that's
many
the whole
times, no, we think that it's got to be something very profound. None of that. I think you can write the ordinariest things, the simplest things can be written about. And there is a story there, and I think it's also important to put pen to paper.
that's what.
And
I think
fight writer's block.
for years, my husband's gotten me this book and a pen as a birthday gift, and he's like after my life. He write, and when if I take a book, I'm like I wouldn't know what to write. But you will know all my friends. It's in WhatsApp or Facebook. I can't stop writing. Once I start,
Wow.
it's endless. But
In fact,
it-
there's a translator, a very famous translator called Arunava Sinha. I think some of you may have read his work also. Arunava says that he believes that people are writing more than ever before now. Because people are texting, people are writing on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere, right? So suddenly everyone is writing.
Like you're a living example. I am often asked to talk about what the internet has contributed to our lives as the generation from when the internet began. And while many people say it has expanded my knowledge base, infotainment, and connectivity, but I think the true contribution is the democratization of talent in the area of expression, writing. And that democratization has really given birth to huge number of people who are now believe that I'm a good author, I can write. Whether it is a post, and that's where people like you began writing Facebook posts, and you can discover the real author in you.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point, actually. And I think you also feed off of what people say, right? And that is one of the areas where social media has really helped.
Dave, anything? Dave is also a freelance writer, content editor.
Hi, Kalpana.
Hello, hi.
It's nice to meet somebody who's born in 1961 and also has a software background.
Oh my God, all right.
Yeah.
You are
So-
1961, huh? All right.
Yeah.
The
Rarely
year
meet-
of the metal ops
Yeah.
here in Singapore.
And incidentally, this writer Vikram Chandra, who's based in the US, he also has a software background, and I don't know whether you've
So
seen
he-
this book of his.
Oh, I've heard about it. I've heard about it.
It's
Yes.
Sublime.
Yeah,
Oh,
I
is
know
that the
him.
new one?
It's not very new. I think I picked it up last year.
Last book.
It's about his work in software and writing, both combined.
He's a Sacred
So,
Games guy, Anupama
That's
Chopra's
right.
brother.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Tanuja Chandra's brother.
Red
So-
Earth and Pouring Rain. I just love
Right.
that title.
Right, right.
Oh.
So for all, there's a high probability is also 1961, but that besides. Yeah. So I have been quietly observing this area of Madhya Pradesh where I live is the Indore district. It's called Malwa.
Mhm.
So Malwa has its own dialect of Hindi, and just near, if you go 60 kilometers downhill, you reach the plains of Nimad, where the Narmada flows. So Malvi Hindi has its own flavor, and that also often enters the English which is spoken here. So in a
Oh,
very quiet way, I collect these nuggets.
what was
like
that? The one you wrote the other day?
Foundation.
What is it?
Foundation.
Yeah. They'll say-
Foundation.
Foundation.
Use it in a
Foundation.
sentence?
Yeah, they'll say like ऐसा कोई फाउंडेशन नहीं है कि आपको 8 बजे आना ही है, you know.
That's innovative. That's really innovative.
So you have
Oh my
things
God,
like-
I've never heard this.
like करना है तो करिए, वैसे कोई फाउंडेशन नहीं है, you know. And then they'll say things like ये तो असली चीज है, बहुत जिनाइन है, जिनाइन.
Genuine.
Genuine?
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
Genuine,
right.
genuine.
जिनाइन,
I've heard that.
जिनाइन चीज है ये, you know. So
There's a Chambal crowd, you know.
actually Chambal begins here. It's like a Chota river. By the time it reaches 200 kilometers north, it's a big river. So Chambal, much more than Chambal, there is like another river called the Shipra, which flows in Ujjain. So anyway, it's a land of rivers,
Wow,
this place.
fascinating.
And so plus my years, middle school years in Rajasthan, Alwar. So there also I picked up a lot. And I used to realize when I went from one place to another, I should be careful about the Hindi I use. Because when I went to Rajasthan, I was teased about my Malwa Hindi. In my childhood, I spent 4 years here. I went to Rajasthan, I was teased about my Malwa Hindi. In 3.5 years, I picked up Rajasthani Hindi, and I was teased about it in Shillong, where they use Bihari Hindi, you know. So I gradually also learned how this, the language Hindi itself changes from area to area, region to region. So, in fact, I had even written a short story using Malwa English. And there was a writer in the US who's no more now. He was a professor of English called Jai Singh Birje Patil.
Uh-huh.
And he had told me that you must expand it into a novel. And he'd even sent me a similar novel as a gift. So anyway, to cut a long story short,
I look forward.
let's see. I mean,
Wow.
I'm just struggling with it, but let's see, something may come out. But as you said, languages are so dynamic and they evolve, you know, that makes it fun, you know, how the languages evolve and how they change over a period of time, you see.
I'm sitting here in Singapore now for a few months, and Singlish is its own beast.
Yeah.
Right.
English.
Singlish.
Right.
It took me,
Right.
even now, it's very hard for me to figure out so much of what people are saying.
Mhm.
But that's a whole different. In fact, there is a book by a very, very well-known author here. He's written about Singlish. So, speaking English,
Wonderful.
speaking Singlish.
Wonderful.
No, your foundation reminded me to
Yeah.
go back to Uttar Pradesh, where
Okay.
the word permanent could not be pronounced. They would always say permanent. Permanent.
Permanent.
And the bureaucrats had this great thing that if they wanted to call somebody, they would say, "Usko get in karao." What is usko get in karao? No, usko get in karao. Like get out is a word, so usko get in karao. And these are very senior bureaucrats, huh? Labor commissioner kind of, usko get in karao.
Where was
Like
this?
pre-porn, right? Pre-porn. Pre-porn should actually come into dictionary.
Kanpur, Lucknow.
So there is a Singaporean woman here. She's of Indian origin, but born. In fact, she goes back 3 generations. Their family goes back. They've been in Singapore, and she was saying, you know, I don't understand why you guys say pre-porn in India, but these guys in Singlish they say can. That's okay. I can. You know, that's fine. But kids don't get this pre-porn.
Oh, okay. So in Kannada, in the middle of Kannada, when you want to separate 2 things, you say separate.
Oh,
Separate.
Separate.
Separate. Adu idu separate.
yeah, that is like the Tamil Nadu Center.
Nadu Center.
Huh?
Exactly.
Nadu center.
Get to a thing. Like Madhe Madhe Bolu Naka. In between, don't talk.
Oh, there was the story in Calcutta of 2 elderly South Indian ladies in Lake Market trying to negotiate with a rickshawala. And broken Hindi, and one lady saying, Ana jana atana, avardana ao, javardana jao.
Nice one. Muthu sir, why are you so quiet? Is it because there is no business and engineering and all happening here? Sumati, Muthu sir.
I'm enjoying listening to all of you.
Lakshmi is quietened down. Suresh is like, no peep out of Suresh or Rajita. Hello. This is not Shibu who will quietly let people talk and quietly let people talk.
I should have been careful in making my comments on you holding the chair, Eva.
Nobody can dislodge me now. But let's hear your opinions about me.
Just a question to Kalpana. I know you are very interested in your meeting someone at the Dalhousie Hill School. And what was that? I mean, was this educationist of particular interest in English, or was this his way of educating children, or what was it that was?
No, I just wanted to understand education, English education in India. And, you know, I didn't do justice, right? I mean, I could only go to 3 or 4 places. You can only talk to so many teachers. But I went to Lawrence Lovedale. I went to Dalhousie Hilltop School. So that is a public school, but public school with a different focus, because typically in public school, everybody who comes to it, the way the British system was, they were already speaking English. And, you know, for several generations in a family speaking English. But here, this is a farming community that is sending its children to pick up English. So I wanted to tell people about what the public system of education was in India historically. Then I wanted to also check out a tribal school at the border of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, at Anakatti. There is a tribal school run by a gentleman called Srikant. And there, in the Elephant Corridor, the focus is English is just another subject. Srikant's idea is, you know, children are going to pick up English. It's not a big deal. The more important thing is to give them ways in which they can live in this Elephant Corridor. So they have all sorts of games. You know, it is like the Montessori system, K through 12 in the Elephant Corridor. Fascinating. So here was a man who believed that English is really not all that necessary. The children will pick it up. And that's exactly what I saw. The kids were speaking pretty good English without being taught in English medium, you know.
If you really are interested, you know, there is another school that has been actually set up by Roshni Nada, the daughter of Shiv Nada, the HCL, the head of HCL. And this is a fantastic school, actually 2 schools in Uttar Pradesh, run completely free, and it's called Vidya Gyan. And I had gone for one of the convocations of this Vidyagan school in Delhi. They pick up each year about 150 kids from dirt poor families in Uttar Pradesh, primarily from eastern Uttar Pradesh. And children really from very, very poor homes. They do a small kind of, entrance test for them and then get them into the school. So most of the kids come in when they are about 7, 8 years old. Some of them are from such poor families that they're completely skin and bones when they come to the school.
Wow.
They don't know a word of English, and 6, 7 years down the road, the education is completely free. It's all the boarding, lodging, including, as Roshni was telling me, money for even soap and normal toiletries is provided by the school. And when I had gone for the convocation, there was this young girl. She was had been admitted to Wellesley. On a full scholarship. She was going to Wellesley, and she started her speech. She said that, I come from a family of 6 children. My father is a laborer. He's a farm laborer, and she said I was the eldest in my family, and under normal circumstances, by the time I give my speech as a valedictorian, I would have been married and would have been the mother of at least 2 children, with the third on the way.
Wow.
And she spoke such flawless. I mean, it was just amazing. And Roshni was telling me when this child first came to the school, she didn't know a word of English, not a word of English. And today she gets on her own steam. She gets into Wellesley to get a scholarship and go and study. So I mean, it's quite amazing the kind of work that some of these people are doing in education. And every year this school churns out about 150, 200 odd students. Some of them get into IIT, some of them get into Delhi University, into good universities, and some of them get, like in this particular year, there was one in Wellesley, one got into Stanford, one was going to Princeton. Wow. And all of these on full scholarships. I mean, they were, the Shiv Nara Foundation wasn't funding these kids. They had got full scholarships on their own strength. So, and you can imagine, and this is in Sitapur in UP, studying from a school in Sitapur to achieve this is quite, it's really inspiring what some of these schools are doing. And I thought that, having gone to Rishi Valley, I thought I was the kind of, I'd gone to the King's school, but I think these schools are doing a hell of a lot of great work.
Wow, thank you. Wow.
Hey, Rani.
Yeah, hi, Kalpana. I just enjoyed your talk, but I'm going to unfortunately leave because I have a family
No problem. Thank
Zoom
you
call now.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
I think we'll wind up now unless anybody has any burning questions to address to Kalpana.
Just a moment of serendipity. You mentioned Hilltop. In fact, most people in Arbors met Suvir and Dolly in Lakshmi Narayan's Diwali party many years back. And they were the previous owners of Hilltop Dalhousie.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Look at how small the world is.
Yeah. Oh my God. Really? Yeah. Poonam is her sister-in-law. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. Wow.
All
I
right,
told
then.
you, connections go many ways.
Yeah.
Whether it's through Anandi, whether it is through Hari Vishwanath,
Crazy.
whether it is through so many different people.
Network people. Network.
Small world indeed. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Rohini. I really appreciate it.
It's very nice having you on board, and I think all of us enjoyed it. Thank you very much for the talk and very active discussion. So shall we wind up then, Shibu, with your permission?
Okay.
Thank you.
I also wanted you guys to get in touch.
It's going to rain in Arbors today. You're asking Shibu for permission. Normally it's the other way around, no?
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll get back to my carousing.
I wanted
Yeah.
you guys
It's a moment
He's
of
partying
humility.
with his buddies. You come back home. I'm going to show you now. Bye, guys. It was good. Thank you all for joining in.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.